Welcome to the Big Movement Podcast. If you're ready to create results and make huge strides in your business, finances, personal development, and health, then you're in the right place. Pushing past excuses and powering through procrastination can be a challenge alone. Here, you'll get the support, tools, and knowledge you need to get to the level you desire in your business and life. Let's get started with your host, Byron Ingram.
And welcome to another episode of the Big Movement Podcast. Today we have a special guest. We have Claudia Petrilli, who's a holistic health coach who works with clients who are tired of feeling guilty about their food choices and not loving what they see in the mirror. So we're going to really dive into how do you get past those things that are holding you back when it comes to food and making those right choices. Then ultimately, how do you create that self-love? Because if you don't love what you see in the mirror, that's going to be the biggest block you have to achieving the results you're looking for. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. So Claudia, welcome to the Big Movement Podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So Claudia, tell a little bit about your background, because you have a very interesting journey of how you became a health coach.
Sure. Well, let's see. I'll start from when I was a child.
Okay.
I guess that's where it all kind of stemmed from.
Mm-hmm.
I always kind of had issues as a kid, health issues that they weren't super serious, but they were always bothersome. And there were things that just never seemed to be resolved by traditional medicine. So for instance, I had a lot of digestive issues as a kid. I used to get a lot of headaches. I didn't sleep well at night. And you go to the doctor and it's like, okay, you can take a pill or you can do this, but there was never any resolution. And I just continued to deal with a lot of this stuff. And of course, as I grew older, things escalated. So then it started affecting my hormones. And just as I was a teenager, I started to really experience a lot of issues. Then as I got older, I went into college and I gained weight. I had acne, just things that, again, they're not super serious, or at least, most people don't think they're serious, but they're bothersome. And what I've learned now is that most of these issues are all symptoms of something else that's going on. So let's see, I'm trying to think back now. I guess, I ended up graduating college, with a degree in art and design. And I ended up working in the corporate field for a while. And my first job out of college was when I met my manager at the time, who was studying to actually be a health coach herself. And prior to this, I had no idea what a health coach was. Mm-hmm. I really didn't know much about, healthy eating, moving your body. My parents, we always ate healthy. My mom cooked meals at home, but they didn't really value, exercise and physical activity and sports. I never did any sports as a kid. I just wasn't very physically active. Okay. And then, So she started just teaching me things here and there, like what she was learning while she was in school. And, she really taught me about the meat industry and things to look for when you go grocery shopping, and, what quinoa was. I had no idea what that or even kale was at the time. And now it's all the rage.
Right.
Yeah. So then, just with her, I wasn't even a client of hers. It was just, we were friends, we got along. She was my manager, but, she was super cool and was teaching me stuff. And I started making lots of changes, just eating healthier, cutting back on sugar, moving my body. And I ended up losing about close to 30 pounds.
Wow. That's incredible.
So yeah. And, it was nothing crazy, no strict diets, no pills, no shakes, nothing like that. It was just, I just started taking care of myself, really. And, I lost that weight. That was probably a good 10 years ago. And I've managed to keep it off ever since. So, and then after that job, I ended up leaving there and I ended up working in Manhattan for a few years. And, I had kept the weight off and I was eating healthy and I was still exercising. But at that point, my stress level was through the roof. I was commuting almost 3 hours every day into Manhattan from New Jersey. and at the time, like I was a graphic designer. Like I said, I majored in art. So I also had like a little freelance business on the side. I was always an entrepreneur at heart.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah. And so, I'm getting up early in the morning, commuting into Manhattan, working a full day, coming home, and then I'm getting back on the computer to work on my freelance business. So even though I was still trying my best to exercise and eat well, I just I didn't have any downtime. I wasn't sleeping well because I was constantly on the go. I didn't, allow myself to really just relax in the evening. And then of course, my health started to go downhill from there.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
So then I guess I was working in Manhattan about 2.5 years doing this, every day, schlepping into the city, exhausted, not sleeping well at night. It was just a vicious cycle. And then I remember, it was one night, I guess I was driving. Yeah, I remember very well, actually. I was driving home from the train station, rushing to get home to finish a freelance project when I got into a pretty bad car accident. And that was a real big wake-up call for me.
Right.
Yeah, because it's like I was rushing to do so much because like I am a motivated person and I wanted to build my little business, and I was, I didn't want to be working 9 to 5 forever. And I always had in the back of my mind that I would start a little side business and, eventually just work for myself. But I was doing too much. It was just too much, and my body couldn't handle it. And, and not that the accident was actually my fault. It was the other person's, but I often wonder if I was even more aware of my surroundings. Maybe I could have like reacted quicker. I mean, who knows? But it was just very like, it was like a message. I felt like, saying like, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep commuting every single day. You can't keep working these long hours and coming home and working even more and not taking care of yourself, not sleeping. I mean, I was running on empty at that point. And so that's when I made the decision to start looking for a job closer to home. And I did. I ended up finding another design job in New Jersey, significantly closer to my house. And then at that point, a lot went through my mind at that point. It was similar to the jobs I had in the past where, I was a designer, I was working for a company, not doing my own thing, and I was definitely not able to be as creative as I wanted to be. Like a lot of designers kind of go through this, especially their first couple of jobs out of college. It's like, when you're in college, you get to like work on really cool projects and you build your portfolio and everything is really, vastly different, and you could do so many different creative things. And then when you start to work for a company, you end up kind of being, what's the word? It's like, you're almost like pigeonholed and you're stuck kind of in a box because it's like, oh, well, we have this certain branding and we have a certain look and certain colors that you have to abide by. And you can't really be as creative as you'd like to be. And the last job I had, there was like hardly any creativity allowed in the job. And it was definitely, it started to just kind of eat at me, I guess. I just felt like not excited to go to work. I didn't feel valued. I didn't feel like I was utilizing all of my skills as a designer. Mm-hmm. And then that's when I kind of made the decision. I was feeling better because I was able to have more downtime since I wasn't commuting, and I slowed down a little bit with my freelance business. But that's when I decided to become a health coach. It was funny because I had focused so much on my own health. My colleagues would kind of see the way I was eating, and when we would have conversations, they were like, "You're really knowledgeable about like health and wellness, and like this is really cool. Like, did you ever think about like doing this as a career?" And I remember thinking like, no, I have like, what would I even do? Like, would I be a nutritionist? Like, what are the options? And then I started kind of looking, researching, talking to people. And then that's when I stumbled upon the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And that happens to be where my manager from years before had gone, and I didn't even realize it. But we still had kept in touch, and she was like, "That's where I went."
Wow.
Yeah, and
That's a
she loved it.
coincidence.
Yeah, it's really funny. And at the time, like, and it had changed so much through the years. Like, it used to be a school where you had to go in person for a weekend. And then by the time I was looking into it, it was all online. So it was totally flexible, super convenient for somebody who was working a full-time job.
Right.
So I enrolled and that was it. Never looked back.
Oh, excellent. And sometimes that's all it takes. It's
Yeah.
taking that leap of faith to do something different, to follow what it feels natural to you because you have that story about overcoming things, those challenges that you had growing up, and to be able to lose 30 pounds. That's significant, where people are going to notice that when they're following your journey.
Right.
Which is a lot different. So now, when you became a health coach, what was it that made you decide that that you needed to do this, and where did you start with in terms of helping people after you finished school?
So, let me think for a second. I mean, there's so many things you can do as a health coach. I mean, of course, in the school, they teach you, they do give you some like business tips and strategies and how to go about it. And they basically recommend a 6-month program that you offer to people. So I started off where I wanted to do one-on-one coaching, and the 6-month program just seemed very long to me. And even though when I started my own health journey, quote unquote, it took me close to a year to lose that weight, but I didn't know what I know now. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I believe that people can achieve results even quicker than a year's time. And while a 6-month program probably may work for some coaches, I preferred to do something a little shorter. So I started off with a 3-month program. And that was basically what I had started off with offering people, was a 3-month program where I work with them one-on-one. We chat on the phone or meet in person twice a month. And in the interim, they were able to email me with any support, and I was able to send them resources and things like that.
Okay. And then what was this success of your program when you started off that way, which is you did it differently than what other people were being advised to do?
Well, everything is definitely trial and error in life and in business, for sure. I didn't know that you had to choose or figure out who your ideal client was, and, that you had the ability to choose who you'd like to work with. And at the time when I first started out, I was attracting a lot of people who wanted to lose weight, and a significant amount of weight. And I suppose it's because, I had my story that I had lost 30 pounds and, blah, 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 and that I was, a success story. So I had people coming to me for that. But unfortunately, I noticed that, if somebody has a lot of excess weight that they want to lose, there's a lot more going on than just the surface. There's, generally there's inflammation in the body. There's emotional issues attached with it. And those type of clients are a lot harder to work with than, say, somebody who is already kind of eating healthy. They're already mindful of their food choices, but they need some fine tuning and some more guidance.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's always the case. There's usually some underlying presence that people have to overcome. Like you said, there's emotional issues. There could be trauma from the past and so forth that's causing them to hold on to the weight. And it's not just, okay, here, do these things and ta-da, it's more okay. You have to spend more time, energy, and resources to do it. So what did you do after you discovered this?
So and I worked with a couple of clients that their main goal was weight loss. And I found that it was very draining for me, and a little bit out of my scope of practice at the time, because there were so many underlying issues in terms of their physical health and then their emotional health. Like you just said, a lot of times people are holding on to weight and for several reasons. And just based on what I've learned and, working with people, I found that they never wanted to talk about deeper issues. They wanted to just know, well, what can I do? What can I eat? Tell me what to eat so that I can lose this weight in X amount of months. And it was like, not that they wanted a quick fix necessarily, but they didn't want to really get to the root of why they had this extra weight. And I found it really hard as a coach, a new coach at the time, to really be able to get to that root level in a safe way so that I could maintain a safe practice.
Right.
So I ended up changing my business and my messaging a bit. And I don't mention weight loss really in most of my marketing, but if I ever do mention weight loss, it's more like jumpstart your weight loss, or, you have an extra 10, 15 pounds you want to lose. Great. I'm your girl. I'll help you out. Because that's much more manageable than somebody who wants to lose, say, 50 to 100 pounds. And there are coaches out there who specifically work with people and clients in that range, but I'm not one of them. And I don't feel like it was working for me in my business.
Right. And that's critical that you understood that aspect of who you wanted to work with and who you didn't, because so many people, when they go into business, they take that approach of, I want to help everybody. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, as much as we would want to do that, there's a limiting factor, because you're only one person.
Correct.
And based on how you build your business, you want to do other things besides work, like, let's say, sleep.
Right.
The important things in life. You just can't work 24 hours a day and be like a little machine, and like next person, okay, you're taking care of, before you know it, you're run down and you're not doing the things that you need to do to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So once you decided on that you want to focus these people, like jumpstarting their weight loss, what impact did that have on your business in terms of shifting it that way?
Well, I focus mostly on people who want to understand their cravings. And specifically, I talk a lot about sugar cravings, because I feel like sugar is such a huge problem. It's evident. It's in everything. And it affects you in so many ways. It affects your skin, your hormones, your weight, your mood. And I just find that there's so many symptoms, not diseases. A lot of people, they're labeled as diseases, but really they're symptoms of something else that's going on, like depression, anxiety, extra weight, imbalanced hormones, things like that. And that I truly feel stem from sugar overload. So because I also had an issue with sugar. I consider myself a former sugar addict. And I think that's part of why I was holding on to extra weight, and why I wasn't sleeping well, and why I was moody, and why I had some acne. So I definitely speak to that a lot more. And I am attracting a very different type of client who they understand that they have a problem with sugar, or that they have, carb cravings, and they want to understand, like, how can they avoid that? How can they, make swaps so that they're eating more complex carbs versus simple carbs? So it's more of, I guess, like a client that is a little more evolved in their health, and they understand that sugar is a problem, versus somebody who is like, what do you mean sugar is a problem?
Right.
Why can't I have a donut for breakfast? And they're just completely unaware of like the effects. And that's like really starting at square one. And that's not where I really want to have my business.
Right. Oh, naturally, you want people to help people have awareness. Mm-hmm. Inform us of why sugar, you believe, is this problem. Because if you think about it, as sugar isn't everything, I think there's this misconception of what sugar actually is and what it does to the body.
Right. Well, I mean, we need glucose with that. That's blood sugar, essentially. We need glucose, in our body. It helps with hormones. It helps with energy. The problem is that we're getting the wrong types of glucose, or sugar rather. Glucose or fructose rather, from fruit. That's one thing, versus sugar that's in, like I said, a donut, or a simple carb like a bagel. And what happens is then, you're taking in this sugar, and it's essentially going into your bloodstream. You know, like your pancreas is going to create this hormone called insulin. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Right.
Yeah. So, and that helps to just distribute the sugar a little bit slower but the problem is we're eating so much sugar on a daily basis. It's in our drinks. It's in our food. It's in protein bars, and pretty much it's everywhere, unfortunately. Right. And what happens is like your body kind of goes into overdrive, and all that extra sugar ends up in your liver. And yes, your liver detoxes certain things from your body, but when it's too much, it becomes almost sluggish. And that extra sugar, really turns into fat. And that's where a lot of people gain weight, and then they have trouble keeping it off.
Right. It's definitely a challenge. If you look at the foods we live in today, I think if people took a moment and just glanced at, let's say, the food labels of all the foods they would typically eat, and they'll notice some type of sugar is added to everything.
Right. I try to teach my clients, like, read labels. Don't just look at the nutrition facts. Look at the actual ingredients. Is sugar one of the first few ingredients listed? Is there high fructose corn syrup, dextrose, maltodextrin? There's so many names for sugar. It's very sneaky, high fructose corn syrup. And, that's what I like to just educate people on, what are all the names for sugar? And, make sure you're reading, because, a lot of people say, yeah, but why would these companies make these foods if they're so unhealthy? And all I say is, because you're paying for it, and that's more money in their pocket.
Right.
I honestly, I don't think that most of these companies have, their customers' health as a priority, unfortunately.
Right. Well, when you look at a lot of companies, their responsibility comes down to the shareholders' profitability. So they're going to put out the foods which are going to be, to make the most sense. How can they achieve that? And because people love have that sweet tooth because they've been conditioned for it, like, let's make it all tasty and great and blah, 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 versus this food's healthy for you, but it's not sweet.
Right.
And because of the conditioning, not very many people, when you think of the masses, would want to buy it. So they don't make it. Right.
And I mean, it's also, it's your palate. Like, because you become so accustomed to that sweet taste, it's very hard to, quote unquote, wean yourself off of it. So, to go from eating something that has a ton of sugar to something that has, like, no sugar at all, I mean, it just tastes completely bland. Versus if you're slowly kind of weaning yourself off of sugar, by replacing things with, like table sugar, things like that, with more natural sugars like honey, maple syrup, eventually you're not going to crave that sweetness. And if you do have something really sweet, you're going to taste like how sweet it is, and you're not going to like it.
Right. Oh, definitely. I think people don't understand that once you detox your body from sugar like that, to have something that's normally processed, you don't want it anymore. Like, oh my gosh, that's the reaction you get. But people have to go through that phase of changing it, of why your body doesn't necessarily need that.
Right.
And it's a shift.
Yeah. I remember years ago, before I started eating healthier and really educating myself, I used to drink soda all the time. And then I stopped. And then years later, I remember tasting it, and I was like, oh my God, it tasted so awful.
Right. Oh, definitely. I think back, it's probably been close to 10 years since I've drank soda.
Wow. Good for you.
And just the thought of like, how could I do that? Because it would be so much sugar in there. I couldn't consume it even if I wanted to.
Right. Yep.
It's just that making that conscious decision to not have something there.
And I realize it's tough, especially, if you go to events or you go out to dinner and there's always dessert. Like, everything is revolved around food.
Right.
Most events, like, there's going to be food there. And most events I go to anyway, especially family events, like, dessert seems to be more important than the actual food, which drives me crazy. There's like always at least 4 or 5 different desserts to choose from. And, I try to teach people, listen, it's hard to just quit cold turkey, but make a conscious decision. If you must have dessert, have something small or opt for fruit, just, at least if they're starting out. I mean, I personally, like if I go to a party or something, I pretty much avoid the dessert table or I'll have some fruit. But it's also because I see it and I don't crave it anymore. I've trained my body, my mouth, like to just not crave that super sweet food anymore.
Right. And it's a process that you have to train yourself to. It's
absolutely
not going to be easy because if you think about it, of how people are conditioned from a very early age to consume sugar to suddenly when they're in adulthood of, oh, by the way, you need to get off all this stuff. And they've seen all the cereal commercials as a kid, like, oh, you're going to have Frosted Flakes. Yeah. You mean Sugar Flakes.
Right.
All the way until they're an adult and they're eating things. They're going out to eat like, oh, you want this dessert? Oh, it's chocolate decadence. I must have this. And it's a process that it's not going to happen overnight, no matter how much you want it to.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's definitely, you have to like educate yourself. And there's some people that they just don't care. Like they want that sweet and they're addicted to it. And I mean, I understand it, but, and then there are the people who they want to make changes and they see how sugar is affecting their health and their mood and how they feel every day.
Right, exactly. And it's something that people have to first have that conscious awareness of about it. So with your stance on sugar, how are you getting your message out there about it? Because you have a lot of passion for it and people, they need to know more about how to kick that sugar craving.
Right. Well, I have a program called Kick Sugar to the Curb.
Oh, how convenient.
Yeah. It's actually, I'm relaunching it next Monday, the 19th. I've been running this program since 2013, I believe.
Okay.
I think, yeah, because I was still in school while I was starting to create programs and coach. I think I graduated in 2014, but yeah, I had already started coaching prior to that. And it's a great program. It's evolved since then. And, that's pretty much my most popular program and people love it. It's 10 days long. Of course it's not like going to make you completely never want to have sugar in your life again, but It's a really good start to get you to understand how sugar affects you, how it makes you feel, and what are healthier swaps and how you can really eat whole foods and feel satisfied and not want sugar. That's a big part of it is, most people are not eating, they're not eating enough throughout the day. And if they are eating, they're generally reaching for simple carbs, like a bagel for breakfast, a sandwich for lunch, pizza for dinner, whatever it is.
Right.
And these are all simple carbs and they're just going to make you tired. I mean, they're going to give you that like jolt of energy at first because that's what carbs do. But, shortly thereafter, you're going to have a bit of a quote unquote sugar crash. And then you're going to end up craving even more sweets. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. So,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's that cycle that never goes away with some people, and it becomes that cycle. You think about the people, like you mentioned, who have a donut for breakfast, or you think of they'll have a donut and they're having coffee, and then by lunchtime they're having some other sweet, and then they're having that mid-afternoon crash where they're feeling sluggish, and they're infusing their body with more sugar and caffeine, and the cycle just continues to perpetuate itself. How are you helping people who are stuck in that cycle?
Well, I mean, like with this program, so it's essentially it's a 10-day program, and I teach them how to be more mindful of it and how to look for sugar in their meals, whether it's in salad dressings or, instead of, if they generally have a bagel for breakfast, I'll recommend other healthier options. So for instance, something like a protein and a healthy fat, like an egg and half of an avocado. That's going to really, that's going to satisfy your hunger for one. And it's going to, it'll keep you satiated for hours versus something like a bagel. So I basically teach them healthier swaps that are going to keep them satisfied for longer so that they're not starving at their next meal. Because when you eat something that's not so great and that's not going to satisfy you, you end up a lot of times binging at your next meal. And that's when you end up reaching for things that are not so healthy.
Right. Oh, definitely. And that's something people have to be aware of. It's making those conscious, healthy choices regardless of what's going on around them. Mm-hmm. And that makes a huge difference in things. So now, with your programs and you have your coaching business, and how are you getting your message out there to people? What have you found to be the most effective thing that's reaching your target audience right now?
Like what do I use? What platform?
Right. What platform? What methods are you using to get your message out there?
Well, I mean, my business is mostly online. That said, I'm sure building an online business is definitely, it's tough. It's competitive. There's so much out there, so many online entrepreneurs. So I do still believe that offline marketing is a great way to build up your business. It's a great way to get your name out there so that people can really get to know you. So I do host live workshops a few times a year. I've taught classes in the community center. I actually have a couple that I'm going to be doing, I believe, in the spring of 2017 for a couple of schools. I try to get myself out there in the community. That's one thing. And then for online, I used to do a lot of blogging, which I still do. I write a lot, and then I'll post on things like social, like Facebook. That's probably like my main outlet that I use. But I've also more recently been doing a lot of video and live video, and that seems to get quite a bit of activity.
Right. And those are the ways that things are really transitioning towards, especially when you look at the different live video platforms, because you can be more authentic. You look at, there's a part of the world where people want to have that perfect appearance. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, well, just be yourself. It's not having the perfect lighting. It's not being perfect, where people want to see that you're real, not just this fictitious person that looks pretty on camera. Like, right. Everything looks great, but in reality, it's like, oh, something totally different versus, I'm here today. I want to get this message, but I really want us to go back to bed, that type of a thing. So people can relate to you. Yeah.
And I remember when I started doing, I just remember like being constantly told by people like, video's the way to go, video's the way to go. Mm-hmm. And so I started doing YouTube videos, and I mean, I just like would obsess over it. Yeah. I would do like tons of takes, because at the time I didn't know how to edit them, and it was all new to me. Mm-hmm. But now, I mean, I still do YouTube videos here and there, but I'm very active like on Snapchat. And I have a private Facebook group. It's a little community of women, and I'm in there a couple times a week on live video, and, no makeup. Sometimes I haven't even showered yet, and I just get on and I say, hey, ladies, this is a recipe I'm making tonight, or do you have any questions about XYZ? And, people like that, and you're totally right. Like, they want to see the real you. They don't want to constantly see you looking perfect and all polished, because that's not reality.
Right. Oh, definitely. And it's that shift, because if you think about how it's just transitioned over time with the different platforms, they want that authenticity, realize that you're just like me. And that's what people need the most to be able to connect with someone, versus they feel that someone's on a pedestal. Oh, they're way up there. I can never be like that, versus, oh, wait, you're really just like me. You just figured this out quicker. Awesome.
Right. Exactly. I mean, like, Snapchat is so great for that, because like I was kind of terrified to be on video, on camera. Mm-hmm. And I just started playing with that little by little. And it's great because so many people are authentic on there. And of course there's some that maybe aren't, but for the most part, at least the people I've watched and followed, they seem very authentic. Mm-hmm. And it made me feel more comfortable to be able to say, I had a piece of cake last week and look, I have a zit on my face. To let people know, like, hey, sometimes I'm not perfect. Sometimes I do have a piece of cake or chocolate or whatever it is. But these are the consequences. I personally break out from them. Like that's an issue that I have to deal with every day. So yeah.
Right. And things like that, it's what people want to know. But if you think about it, here it is that if you have that picture perfect image out there, like you always have to eat healthy, but then you have to let people know through this process, like it's okay. Having a piece of cake is not going to be the end of the world from time to time. It's just that if you make it like a daily habit suddenly, like, oh, you have your 3 courses of cake every single day. Probably not a good idea.
Right.
But everyone's human.
Yeah, exactly. But, and there's, it could get a little, I don't want to say dangerous, but when people say, oh, everything in moderation, while that could work for some people, on the other end of it, on the other side of the spectrum, if somebody truly has a food intolerance or an autoimmune disorder, there are certain foods that could be quite detrimental to your health. And that is where I would work with somebody in a one-on-one coaching and really try to understand what's going on. And I would probably put them on an elimination diet or have them at least cut out something like dairy or gluten to see how they feel. Because yes, if you have a piece of cake, say you do have an autoimmune disorder like Hashimoto's or something, and you have a piece of cake, that gluten that's in there could really affect you for a really long time. And it takes a long time for your body to process it and to come out of your body. So in that case, it could be actually dangerous.
Right. Definitely. And, you mentioned gluten, and it seems like there's I don't see a big craze right now. Like, oh, there's gluten-free this, gluten-free that. How much of the foods that you see out there where they're labeled as gluten-free are truly gluten-free?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a craze in that so many corporations have just went crazy capitalizing on it. And, people have had celiac disease for years. So that's one thing. And those people need to stay away from gluten for sure. Right. It could be fatal. It's really bad. Versus, there's been more and more studies and research that the gluten that is in wheat nowadays, it's just different. Wheat is processed much differently nowadays than it was, when our grandparents used to have wheat and bread and things like that. And I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Going on gluten and how it's
I'm getting hungry.
From...
This conversation's making me hungry.
I know they feel like food and we're talking about it. Great.
Yeah, exactly. So, and now, of course, it's coming out that more and more people do have these intolerances to gluten. A lot of people do. And it could be more extreme for some than others. Like me personally, when I have gluten, I get really bloated. And that was something that I always experienced growing up. And I never knew that it was from what I was eating. My mom was always like, oh, you just have gas or whatever it was. Right. I was like, no, I shouldn't look like 4 months pregnant and when I'm not. And, and it was something that even up until a few years ago, I would eat it. I thought I was eating healthy. I was eating whole wheat bread, things like that. And I just felt terrible. I looked terrible and my skin was bad. And until I really cut it out, that's when I started to realize oh, wow, there is some truth to this, and really started doing my own research. And, I'm a firm believer that certain people would do much better without gluten. That said, you're absolutely right. There are so many products on the market now that are quote unquote gluten-free. And yes, they may not have any gluten in that product, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they were processed on a completely gluten-free facility. So there could be cross-contamination, and that can get really dangerous, for people who are in fact gluten intolerant or have celiac disease, where it could be fatal for them to have that gluten. And of course, then there's the other problem is that, people think oh, it's gluten-free, it must be healthy. Well, think again. Right. Most of the time, these gluten-free products, they're processed just like anything else, and they have a lot of unnecessary additives and sugars and, starches and just things that are they cause inflammation in the body just as much as gluten would, quite frankly.
Right, exactly. You've solved one problem, but you added 5 more,
Right.
and that doesn't defeat what you wanted to do. So now, obviously, people can make smart choices there, and then you're into healthy eating and things, and you talk about dairy. Why should people avoid dairy? Because you see all the commercials on TV saying, "Oh, milk is good for you." Why is that not a good thing?
Dairy, that's always a hot topic. I mean, dairy is known to, again, cause inflammation in the body. For me, I eat dairy, I break out almost like within 24 hours. I have a new pimple on my face, so I avoid it. Maybe I'm vain, but I know it has an effect on me, and it also affects my digestive system, and that's never fun for anyone.
Right.
The problem with dairy that at least I see is, unfortunately, conventional dairy. These cows are given antibiotics, they're given added hormones, then you're ingesting them, and that's a problem to me. If you're drinking organic dairy or grass-fed milk or even raw milk or goat's milk, some people are okay with that and they don't have any issues. That's fine. Not every person is exactly the same. The thing with cow milk or that kind of dairy is there's a protein called casein in it that a lot of people are intolerant to. And that's actually what I am intolerant to. Whereas something like goat's milk, I think there's less of the protein in there. And that's why some people can tolerate goat's milk more than like a cow's milk product.
Right. And those are the things that people have to be aware of when you look at their whole diet. What are those triggers that cause you to, look bloated or to have different reactions? Because if people become aware of that, you think of how many problems that solves right then and there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in terms of the calcium, okay, yeah, there may be calcium in milk, but I believe that people get more calcium from, something like greens. Eating more greens in your diet every day.
Right.
Boom, calcium. I'd rather have that as my calcium source than milk that has been treated with hormones or antibiotics.
Right. Oh, exactly. It's all about making those healthier choices.
Right.
So now, if people are really thinking about getting healthier, what's one thing someone can do today to start making a change?
Cutting back on sugar.
Right.
Of course. And just starting to eat more whole foods as often as possible. When you go food shopping, stick to the perimeter of the store. Buy whole foods. Don't just buy things that are in a box that are processed.
Right. And that's so critical. If you can get things that are unprocessed. And I jokingly like to say things like this. When you're looking at a label on something, if it looks like a compound that you might have read about in a chemistry class, it's probably not a good idea to eat it.
Right. Yeah, I say that to people. If you can pronounce it, if you don't recognize the name, your body is not going to recognize it. So
Right.
Put it back on the shelf.
Right. Exactly. Like, I remember this compound in chemistry class. Bad idea to consume it in some cases. So
right.
You just have to do things from that whole perspective. So now, how can people learn more about your programs and ultimately be able to work with you?
Sure. My website is claudiapetrilli.com, and I offer a free 15-minute consultation for somebody who would want to work with me one-on-one. I do have a little bit of an application process, and currently my one-on-one coaching program is now condensed to a 6-week program. And like I said, I have an application process because, I used to attract the clients that I didn't necessarily feel like were a good fit for me. And I think like most coaches really would benefit from some sort of application process because then they could really see if somebody is serious about getting healthy. And that's where I am right now. I want to make sure that somebody I work with really does want to get healthy and they are willing to make some changes and invest in their health. So that's one way of working with me. So you can apply for my 6-week program and go through that application process. Or I have the short-term program, the 10-day Kick Sugar to the Curb. I do run this in a group format several times a year, but there is also an option for like a DIY if somebody wanted to do it on their own. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'm going to be actually doing a couple things in the fall. Another group program, kind of like a beta program that's going to be 4 weeks. And I am in the process of creating a plan specifically for men, because I know there's tons of coaches out there who mostly cater to women. And I think that, men who are trying to be healthy, they're working out, they're going to the gym. A lot of times they're not necessarily changing their diet.
Right.
And they're not progressing as they could in the gym. They're not seeing the results they want, unfortunately. So I'm going to be doing that. So I'm excited about that.
And that's a great program. I look forward to seeing them, because when you're searching online, coming from the male perspective, the vast majority of programs you see are catered towards women. So you don't see that much catered towards men. Like, men, how should you eat differently instead of steak and potatoes?
Right.
You don't see it.
Yeah. And I mean, my boyfriend, he's very into his health, like he works out. But I remember when I first met him, his diet was horrendous. And he would get frustrated because he wasn't getting the results that he wanted. And I'm like, well, you can work out 1,000 hours a week. If you're eating the wrong food, you're never going to achieve the results you want. And you're actually setting yourself up for, health issues in the long run. And I felt like there was a need, because I read a lot of his like men's health issues and things like that. And, something the other day that just got me so frustrated was one of the articles was suggesting to guys, in order to get more calories in and more carbs, the suggestion was for them to eat, I think it was like Fruit Loops or something. And I was like, are you kidding me?
Wow.
Yeah. Like there are much healthier carbs that you could be eating if you're trying to bulk up or whatever it is that your goals are. So yeah, that's something I'm definitely excited to be working on.
Definitely. If there's publications out there that are recommending Fruit Loops, the sky's the limit of what you can achieve.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, I want to thank you for coming on to the Big Movement podcast today and sharing your wisdom, especially with sugar cravings, because I don't think people know the true impact that sugar has on the body.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Big Movement Podcast today. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Now that you've surely been inspired to take your entrepreneurial career and business to the next level, you can stop by the website and get more. And if you're ready to boost your business brand, be sure to grab your free report, 7 Easy Steps to Build Your Brand Today.